I was inspired by schaffrillas Productions' video ranking Star Wars movies based off their usage of C-3PO and R2-D2 to make a similar ranking of those, and what better character than BYAKUYA Togami to make a video like this on. You just can't find a Danganronpa game without this guy. He makes his premiere in the first game as a survivor, then continues on to the second game for fakesies, and then for realsies in the final chapter. He's also in this stuff. For the ranking, I'll be ranking each individual chapter Byakuya appears in, because it wouldn't be fair to rank Byakuya's character in the entire first game against other games he appears in, which you consider cameos at most. I will also be ranking the Ultimate Imposter, for reasons I will talk about when we get to his segment. Yes, I know he's not actually Byakuya, I played chapter 5. What makes a good usage of Byakuya is in chapters where he takes a bigger role and is all around more interesting and better written. Those chapters will see themselves at the top section of the list, while times he serves nothing of value to the plot and is underused will see themselves at the bottom portion of the list.
It's fictional. It's all fictional?
There is no other segment in the whole Danganronpa franchise that fumbles Byakuya's characterization more than V3's final chapter, simply because it's not even the actual Byakuya in this chapter despite technically being him. Byakuya and every other character in the first two games are turned into mouthpieces for Smuga the Lord Drop for all hours. Don't ask for context, it makes less sense when you know it. So it's not really a chapter's fault for Byakuya being poorly represented, since it was never their intention for the characters to be anything more than glorified cameos. Something I did notice was the fact that Byakuya and the Ultimate Imposter always talk one after another. That small detail is probably the most noteworthy thing about Byakuya's appearance in this chapter. He doesn't have any unique dialogue when characters like Teru Teru, who just did his usual stick being perverted, and Hiyoko, who calls Miko a nasty trashy pig skank, are two characters who truly get to be themselves. Byakuya's dialogue here could be interchangeable with anyone else, and it wouldn't be noticeable at all if it was. It's pretty disappointing when characters people actually think are good, like Byakuya, saying do nothing you remember 4 minutes after playing. So choosing the worst chapter wasn't that hard.
I did a lot of disgraceful things in front of those cameras!
You sure did.
Another final trial at the bottom of the list. These chapters really aren't the guy's strong suit. The thing though that puts this chapter over V3's finale is the fact that it's the actual Byakuya this time. This is the first time in the franchise Byakuya makes a real return to the games, so it's before we get Byakuya fatigue from seeing him literally everywhere, but it's still not to say his appearance is anything special. I think it's great Byakuya came into the virtual world after Makoto, showing off his character development from the first game, which made him more faithful and trusting towards other people, especially Makoto. Even if Byakuya going into the program is just so he could put the other students down easier, when having to choose two options that screws him over in different ways. One thing I found odd and had a bit of potential is the way that the Danganronpa 2 cast barely touched on the fact that their dead friend is sitting right in front of them and has also dropped 200 pounds. Only the one joke about his weight and it's never brought up again. I felt like it could have had the potential for some more interesting interactions and more confusion surrounding the Ultimate Imposter's identity, because this is most of their first time finding out the Byakuya they met was a fake. With this trial having so little to do with Byakuya, his role within it gets overshadowed by Makoto, Junko, and the Danganronpa 2 characters. So despite it being cool seeing Byakuya and have him add to the overall chaos of the final trial, little as that may be, there are many better chapters for this character. Oh, and just in case anyone asks, I did not forget about the prologues and epilogues. I just decided to rank them coinciding with the chapters closest to them. Directly after the end of chapter 6, we get the epilogue that includes a conversation between Makoto, Kyoko, and Byakuya, which was cool and all, but what I find strange is that the epilogue to the second game focuses on the main three characters from game 1. I get they wanted to keep what happened to the Danganronpa 2 survivors ambiguous, but they could have made it about like Chiaki still being in the files of the program, or an extended version of Hajime's final words that capped off the game. And heck, we get to see what happens to the Danganronpa 2 students after the killing game anyway, so they could have implemented that into the epilogue. Who was this video about again? Oh yeah, Byakuya.
My name is Byakuya Togami.
Byakuya makes a great first impression in the first chapter and prologue, but this still ends up being one of his weakest chapters in the first game. Mostly because this is the chapter with the least Byakuya. In following chapters, we get to see Byakuya becoming more Machiavellian and taking control of trials, switching from just a rich asshole into a legit cunning antagonist as we learn more about his upbringing and what lengths he went to become the heir of the Togami Corporation. This chapter's sole storyline is the bond formed between Makoto and Sayaka until her betrayal by having Leon slide into her DMs before he slimes her ass. This leaves us with not a lot of Byakuya in the main story. This isn't to say Byakuya doesn't have any standout moments in chapter 1. Right when the students are placed into a killing game and begin searching for an exit, Byakuya attempts to go alone, which causes the other students to question his cold behavior. Byakuya says there could already be someone ready to kill, and that the other students already know this, hence why they seized up in fear. Can gain freedom while everyone else perishes. The killing game really isn't different from Byakuya's past as the ultimate affluent progeny, being the sole person on top, while everyone else loses. Danganronpa is designed to be a zero-sum game. Only one person, the Blackened, can gain freedom while everyone else perishes. This is how, almost instantly, Byakuya adjusts to the killing game's lifestyle because of how competitive and unempathetic he is to other people. Mondo, the most fierce and assertive student, calls Byakuya out on his bullshit before Byakuya drops one of the hardest lines in the game. To most people, Mondo would be someone you wouldn't want to insult like this, but from Byakuya's point of view, Mondo is just another peasant, no different from anyone else. I think the only person Byakuya's ever been intimidated by was Sakura, and still then, he didn't let his intimidation be clear. Thanks to Byakuya's one request to go alone and his diss on Mondo, we already get a pretty clear picture on how Byakuya is going to be throughout the game. Like I said earlier, Byakuya's role in this chapter is very limited beyond his point, to develop Saika and Makoto's relationship. One thing I did find funny though was Byakuya suspecting Makoto and calling him out as Saika's killer, circling back to how untrustful he was. Even being visibly disappointed when Makoto is revealed to not be Saika's murderer. The fact that this chapter is the weakest use of Byakuya, only because he has a small role in this chapter, is a pretty big sign that Byakuya is going to be a damn great character.
Option 1, it fell. Option 2, it fell. Option 3, it fell.
Because of the nature of the final chapters, there isn't much space for Byakuya to add much to the plot or have any standout moments because Kyoko, Makoto, and especially Junko take up most of the investigation and trial's focus. That is definitely not to say he doesn't have any great bits of dialogue or moments during the finale, mostly in the final non-stop debate when Byakuya drops a top 3 hardest speech in the franchise, and it's not number 3 by the way. It's not number 1 either, but that doesn't really matter. It's just so bold and in line with Byakuya and his beliefs and accomplishments. Coming off so smug and arrogant, but earned, you just can't not agree. I specifically want to highlight the phrase,
Besides, the Togami family isn't dead, because I'm still alive.
it might as well be the greatest quote from one of the greatest characters in Danganronpa. It might seem at first Byakuya being the ultimate trust fund kid would latch on to the Togami name, which he does at certain points, but as we learn more about him, we see that he isn't just a part of the Togami bloodline, he might as well be the Togami bloodline himself. I think his speech overshadows everyone else's tremendously. Like, I don't even remember what some of them said, but I guess Byakuya overshadows all the other survivors in quality, so this is no surprise. Thankfully, in the epilogue, he does get some solid closure on Byakuya's character, also dropping the funniest piece of dialogue in Trigger Happy Havoc. Byakuya, please save some banger lines for the rest of the cast. So, for what it's worth, everything focused on Byakuya is great, but the chapter doesn't really do it often.
Then that's that. The dead body doesn't belong to Kyoko.
Which should have been obvious since she's standing right here.
I never recalled Byakuya's role in this chapter being as solid as it was, which is probably because I'm not too very fond of chapter 5 in most aspects. In the chapter prior, Byakuya forfeits the killing game, with stopping the mastermind becoming his main objective. This puts Byakuya into a leadership role, which he uses to make the others, mainly Toko, do his bidding. Despite his nature of straying away from the group, Byakuya is a great leader. I wonder if we get to see his leadership again somehow. Another thing Byakuya does is voice his suspicions of Kyoko to the group, which he has had since last chapter. After 5 whole chapters, Kyoko's identity is still shrouded in mystery, causing Byakuya to confront and demand Kyoko reveal her talent, but because of her amnesia, she forgot all about her talent, as if it wasn't incredibly obvious. This causes Byakuya to take her room key, making it impossible for Kyoko to enter her room. We also see Byakuya become our partner during the investigation of Mukuro Ikusaba, which is always fun to have, so he can investigate Kyoko's involvement with the murder, which he addresses during the trial. And thanks to Byakuya's alibi with 3 other students, Makoto and Kyoko are the only possible subjects. As usual, Byakuya's dialogue is still sharp, so even with the chapter being pretty lackluster, Byakuya's role is still very solid.
I can't believe she killed someone for only $10 million. I don't even get out of bed for less than 50.
Being in between 2 major developments in Byakuya's character, it's only natural the writers use this chapter as a breather from the chapters Byakuya is most plot relevant. With that being said, Byakuya still managed to be prevalent during the class trial, being delightfully cutthroat and maniacal, still treating the killing school life as a game that he gleefully participates in. When Byakuya discovers the trial may be more complex than it seemed, he shows genuine excitement. After the events of last trial, Byakuya is practically absent from the majority of the daily life segment, only popping up when it's required and to ask questions about alter ego. Byakuya, being the genius he is, unearths most of Celeste's plan, but is just so smug about it he has Makoto spell it out for him. Byakuya is even the first one to point out Celeste's biggest mistake, which is arguably what it got her caught out. So Byakuya was not holding back, and it's wonderful to see. But of course, what Byakuya contributes to the plot this time around is very slim. Hifumi and Super Saiyan Taka do more for the plot than Byakuya in Chapter 3, which doesn't help make Byakuya stick out in any meaningful way during the daily life. But with how great he was in the trial, I think I can reasonably put this chapter high up on the list.
Hardly the work of a clown. Wouldn't you agree?
You're right. That's not the work of a clown. That's the work of a whole circus, you absolute cretin.
What?
For most characters in the game, especially ones who get killed before Chapter 5, they only get one standout chapter, being the one they end up dying in. This is why, for these characters, they only have one great chapter for their characters. Even some of my favorites end up having only one chapter to make an impression. This does not apply to Byakuya. This list's top 3 is where we really see Byakuya performing at his fullest potential, and chapter 4 is none other than one of these chapters, being a point where Byakuya really develops and also kind of serving as the completion of his arc. This is the point where Byakuya stops being the main antagonist and starts serving his role as more of a deuteragonist for Mikoto. So why don't I begin at the motive for this chapter? Monokuma gathers all the students to the gym for the usual motive, which Byakuya points out has gone redundant and he should just get to the point. Monokuma replies that instead of a motive, he's getting rid of a grudge he's had, a grudge against Sakura Ogami. Sakura has been working as a spy for Monokuma because he was holding her dojo hostage, forcing her to kill if she didn't want him to do anything to it. Byakuya believes someone working under the mastermind could not be trusted whatsoever, tying back to his untrusting character. Sakura, becoming public enemy number 1, forces Byakuya to take refuge in the dining hall. The existence of a spy disturbs the balance of equality to all players. All Hina cares about is the safety of Sakura, while Byakuya absolutely does not, going on to say if Sakura were to die, that would be one less person to worry about, which promptly makes Hina slap the shit out of him. Being a top tier rage baiter, Byakuya provokes Hina, daring her to kill him if she really cares about Sakura that much. Hina is putting all emotions over whether Sakura could actually be trustworthy, and Byakuya does the opposite. For someone like him, being emotional and empathetic is beneath him in a life or death game. To him, all he's doing is playing along with the killing game, not considering feelings of other people. So Kyoko warns Byakuya someday his attitude is going to bite back hard. Now up until Deadly Life, Byakuya avoids confrontation at all costs, which probably helped him not become a majorly prime suspect in the trial. That doesn't stop Hina from declaring the killer as either Yasuhiro, Toko, or Byakuya, due to their hatred of Sakura after she's been found out as the mastermind spy. Noticing poison as a murder weapon, Byakuya makes his way to the chem lab and forms his theory on how the killer is based on a number of clues. Sakura's trial should have been fairly easy to solve, but because of the turmoil between the students, the trial became more complex. Not trusting others became their downfalls. Yasuhiro attacking her because he thought she was going to kill him, the literal same thing for Toko and Genocide Jack, and finally Byakuya's accusation of Hina. Because Monokuma didn't want an open and shut case, he forged a letter as Sakura's very silly action note to come across as her being put into a corner and only doing it to prevent a bad situation getting worse. Hina responds by trying to get everyone else executed as she thinks everyone else made Sakura do the silly thing that you shouldn't do. She plants evidence against her and leaves many clues pointing towards her, which Byakuya notices. He pulls out the bottle of poison and proceeds to drink it, to prove that the ball of poison has been replaced with protein powder. The only person who could have done this was Hina. Putting aside all emotional reasons, he determines that she only ever gotten close to Sakura to pull off a murder. This leads to probably one of the most satisfying moments with Kyoko going out of her way to disprove all of Byakuya's claims, using his own evidence to negate his accusations. Byakuya falls for the rage bait as we see Byakuya snap and Kyoko one-ups him. People don't act according to calculations and cost-benefit diagrams. What Hina did is probably what she thought was the most selfless act she could have done to avenge Sakura. Byakuya couldn't understand her emotions. When he dismissed other people's feelings, it came back to bite him. Honestly, most things in this chapter are spectacular. Take it back, Sakura drops the second best speech in all of Danganronpa. The only way to survive is to win is what Byakuya originally thought, but since Sakura and Hina were willing to sacrifice their own lives to deny the reality of the game, Byakuya decides to bow out of it. The others have cast aside their fear for the game, and as for Byakuya, a game like that just isn't any fun to him. And now Byakuya's main motive is to end the mastermind of the killing game. What a great way to end Byakuya's participation towards a mass killing he calls a game by humbling the game's current big bad. Unlike other antagonists, he doesn't die for his deluded and borderline psychotic beliefs. A lot of the times, turning a villain good in the end doesn't always turn out so great for the stories, but in Byakuya's case, it's welcome we get to see him become better while still having the characteristics we love about him. Byakuya's arc is truly epic, and really thanks to this chapter.
Walt, I don't know, man. You've been seeming sus lately. It's almost like we have an imposter among us.
You may think I'm crazy for having him this high on the list, or on his ranking alone. To have him higher than all but one chapters of BYAKUYA Togami, including his great character growth from chapter 4. But man, the ultimate imposter is so great that I'd go as far to say he's pretty underrated and deserving of way higher praise than he has gotten from the fandom. In a lot of character rankings, they don't even rank the ultimate imposter, because he's basically just Byakuya and not his own character, so you can't come at me for ranking him for his chapter's usage of BYAKUYA Togami. I'm sure if R2-D2 was being impersonated to the point the audience at one point thought it was the real R2-D2, it would be reasonable to rank that impersonator alongside the other Star Wars movies' usage of him. One opinion on the ultimate imposter majority of the fandom shares is that he should have became his own character separate from his impersonations. First of all, that isn't really the intention for his character. Second of all, he does stand on his damn own to distance himself away from Byakuya, so it's time to begin why the ultimate imposter isn't just a great standalone character, but also an interesting look at Byakuya himself. Even before we can confirm his real identity, Togami already starts acting like Byakuya, using his mannerisms and being an overall pompous dude. Only difference between the two is that Togami is the leader. Even before being appointed as such, Togami speaks on behalf of the class and leads them into finding clues. It's almost like he's gone through a similar experience like this before, and the only reason we believe Byakuya was the real him is because of the leadership role he takes on. The moment the students realize the danger they found themselves in, the game makes a direct parallel when Byakuya states that they should be most cautious of themselves. And because of this, instead of straying away from the group for his own safety, Byakuya becomes a leader to protect everyone else. The reason Togami behaves like this and why pre-Chapter 4 Byakuya never would is the different levels of trust they both have for others. When Byakuya learned people would be able to sacrifice their own lives to deny the quote-unquote game, he stopped being a willing participant. He vowed to end the mastermind and he even started trusting people more thanks to this. If we pretend Togami is Byakuya, it makes perfect sense for him to act this way. He knows certain people put emotions over survival in a game like this, so instead of working for the game, he works against it, making sure no one is in danger of being killed. I want to highlight my favorite scene before the killings start in Danganronpa 2, the conversation between Togami and Hajime.
That's enough.
Do you think the Byakuya who believed Hina only became friends with Sakura to eventually lure her into killing her would be this open and honest if he never had the realization of basic human empathy? Of course, Togami never had Byakuya's realization. Togami had these morals and trust for others not because of a realization. Maybe if Byakuya didn't grow in an environment where he had to compete for only himself, he would have used his skills to aid the Trigger Happy Havoc students being the leader in place of Taka, not for any personal gain, but just for empathetic reasoning. Like, do you think someone who messed with a crime scene with the intention of a more complex murder when he knew all along the culprit's identity would sacrifice his own life to save Nagito? This is why I think it's stupid of a complaint that the two Togamis are similar, because if you change Byakuya's ideology and him always having to outperform others, you get a character who's still pompous and at certain times a dick, but also a great leader and person. As you probably already know, Nagito sent Togami an anonymous letter saying a murder was going to happen, forcing Togami to take action. Coming up with the idea of a party, he can closely monitor all students, which ends up with him saving Nagito and getting himself murdered, which in hindsight, if he let Nagito grab the knife, he would have prevented his and Chiaki's death. Nice thing to do at the time, but you kinda did an oops here. In a lot of ways, the second game's opening chapter is meant to subvert the story of the first game. Like with the environment, Moni, the cheery beginning, and especially Nagito, who I'm practically destined to talk about one day. and Togami's sudden death. Seeing one of the prior survivors getting killed off immediately meant the second game was going in a different direction than the first. I'm glad Togami exists, not just as a funny reveal at the beginning and then a serious reveal later, but as a look at BYAKUYA Togami. Danganronpa 2 Chapter 1's usage of Togami was absolutely amazing, and another thing the second game does better than the first. Oh wait, there's still one chapter from the first game left on the list. It looks like the first game really did use BYAKUYA the best. Oh, and just in case someone brings it up, no, BYAKUYA in the last few chapters does not count. None of this actually happened, Hajime was just tripping balls.
Silence, you filthy idol killer. I'm in the middle of tampering with the evidence in order to troll all of you and figure out the identity of a serial killer called Genocide Jackoff.
Ever since I had the idea for a video like this, I always knew chapter 2 of the first game would place number 1. BYAKUYA's character peaks in the second chapter he appears in. If it weren't for Mondo, Chihiro, and Taka, this entire chapter would be about BYAKUYA. He takes up so much of the plot, and it is so welcome for us to see the smug elitist turn to a manipulative force to everyone around him. At the beginning of the chapter, the students notice BYAKUYA's disappearance and go on the hunt for him. We find BYAKUYA in the library reading a mystery novel to get himself away from the rest of the group. This is the first time BYAKUYA brings up the killing school life as a game. Much to the annoyance of everyone hearing his psychotic ranting, Celestia confirms this. The killing school life is a zero-sum game. In order for someone to gain something, another person has to lose something. BYAKUYA finds this fun, as he's been doing this his whole life, making him not even acknowledging the possibility he may lose, and tells the other students to try harder to make the killing game experience more challenging before walking off. This is the first of many times the game hammers BYAKUYA's ideology into your skull. They also use the Toko simping for BYAKUYA joke for the first time, and it's alright, it hasn't become tedious yet. The real peak of BYAKUYA's character starts when you and him find Chihiro's dead body. BYAKUYA is all too calm to the sight of Chihiro's body and suggests the murder was done for fun. And because of blood loss being written in blood, the students think the fiendish serial killer Genocide Jack had something to do with this. BYAKUYA purchases Makoto because of how he was able to solve the first trial, so we get to team up for the first time in this series with another person for the investigation. BYAKUYA takes Makoto to the library to look at the murder cases of Genocide Jack, where we learn all about Genocide Jack. The reason BYAKUYA knew about the classified documents is because only unordinary people like him would know about such information. When it came time for the trial, BYAKUYA reveals Toko's split personality, Genocide Jack, and said she caused Chihiro's murder. BYAKUYA knew about this because Toko confided in BYAKUYA about her other personality in the hopes he would go out with her. Instead, BYAKUYA reveals her secret and blames her for murder. Unfortunately for BYAKUYA, Makoto notices difference between Genocide Jack cases and the current one. Apparently, Genocide Jack doesn't kill femboys. That left the only other person that knew about the Genocide Jack files, BYAKUYA. He's really been pushing the theory that Genocide Jack had murdered Chihiro, so everyone suspects BYAKUYA was trying to throw her under the bus for his own sake. His suspiciousness began when he wanted to go into the girl's locker room first to look for a victim, and since BYAKUYA is no perv, the only reason for this is he knew Chihiro was there and that they were the victim. And even more damning, the rope used to suspend Chihiro was actually an extension cord he frequently used. BYAKUYA is unfazed and unconcerned as ever. BYAKUYA only loses cool when Makoto mentions Chihiro could have been killed in a different location, and him not knowing about Chihiro's secret before it was revealed is how we clear BYAKUYA of being the culprit. He only altered the crime scene but did not commit the murder. The real killer ended up being Mondo Awada, who had no chance of getting away with the murder because BYAKUYA witnessed him doing it anyway. After Mondo's execution, the students asked BYAKUYA why he did what he did to convolute the murder and hinder their progress. His answer is that it made things more interesting. BYAKUYA witnessing the murder and that being the end of it, to him, would have been the most boring outcome. In his own words, him helping Mondo with the crime had livened up the game instead of wasting time with an immediate answer. And thanks to his experiment, he found out who to look out for whenever he decides to become the Blackened. So simple, and yet works for BYAKUYA's character greatly. This is the one chapter he does some real heinous and villainous shit. Kokichi and Nagito, the villains from the other games, have multiple times they perform some psychotic shit, but BYAKUYA's villainy peaks here, and he does excellently to make himself a threat to everyone around him and create shocking conflicts for the story. He takes control of 2/3 of the entire trial, playing along with the game, and making everything 1000% more interesting. Chapter 4 was better for developing his character, and Ultimate Imposter continued what Byakuya's arc would have looked like. But what Byakuya did best was his Machiavellianism and others arranged joy for the killing game. So that's what I think is where each chapter would rank based off their usage of BYAKUYA Togami. Maybe you think my opinion and this video's concept is dumb and the Ultimate Imposter should not count as a part of the list, so it'll be very welcome for you to tell me that. Bye Yanara and such.